Hello, 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 my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I see somebody's already here. That's wonderful. It's actually really exciting. Welcome. Yeah. I'm Rosebud Reads, and I'm super excited that you're here. Welcome to my book garden. Actually, welcome to my basement. It's the best I got. What can I say? But we will be continuing to read Golden Terrace, which, speaking of that, I do not own anything connected to Golden Terrace except for the physical copy in front of me and my time. I'm not getting anything from this. It's just me. So please don't come at me with copyright or any of the like. I'm just doing my best, and I'm doing it because I can. And hello, Chichi Kiki. Thank you for being here. I hope you're doing well. Anything new in your life? Getting some nice hot tea so that I'll sound all good. Not right now? That's all good. Oh, Mo Mars Rover, welcome. Hello to you too. No, anything new in your life? And it's totally okay if there isn't, but it's nice sometimes just being asked. But yeah. While I wait on that, I'll do a little, not really, just the daily grind. I feel that so much. Ooh, getting ready for a fairy soiree this weekend. That sounds exciting. I hope you have a wonderful time. Be safe. That does sound awesome, Omar's Rover. No, I hope you have a wonderful time. You definitely could share pictures if you want to. That actually kind of works. I'll bring it up now. I was going to bring it up at the end. So I will still be having a live stream read on Tuesday, but I will not be streaming Thursday next week because I actually will be going to a convention that weekend, and I need just a little bit of time and sleep right before I do the convention grind. So yeah, Tuesday, same as usual, just no Thursday, and it'll be back to it the next week. I'll post that on Blue Sky and on the YouTube posts, but thought I'd just mention it here. But yeah, have an amazing time. That sounds great. But anyway, last time we ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger where Fu Shen actually was kind of trying to implore the emperor because Yan Xiaohan, yeah, I said it right, Yan Xiaohan and him were kind of given the edict that they were going to be married, and Fu Shen kind of was going to implore the emperor to change his mind, and he was already sick and injured, and so him kneeling out in the pouring rain is not the best. So of course, he suddenly collapsed forward, and Yan Xiaohan was quick and deft of hand. He reached out and made a grab, and Fu Shen fell right into his arms with a yell of, "Fu Shen!" That is where we ended last time. So I guess we will get started. Before that, it went kind of long last time, so I did shorten it a little bit. We're going to see how this goes. Initially, I was going to do 6. I think it might be 7. We'll see. Whatever number I put up there. We'll see how this goes. All right. Chapter 9. Fu Shen! An indistinct cry sounded in his ears. He was still conscious. It was only that his body had lost all sensation. The sound of the rain clung to him like his shadow. Someone bent down and lifted him in his arms. There seemed to be something familiar about the feel of those arms. Oh, are we doing a Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian forest situation for those of you who know what I'm talking about? He was reminded of the warm embrace he had been pulled into when he had fallen on the ground a few days ago, and of the gentle hands that had patted his back long ago. Well, all right, that answered the question right there. Got too excited. Who was it? He was taken to a dry and narrow cage, forced to leave that warm chest that was neither too soft nor too hard. He hadn't yet had time to fully enjoy it. His temper immediately flared. He abruptly reached out to seize that person's collar, fiercely pulling towards himself. Bang! Lord Yan, who hadn't yet had time to straighten up, toppled into the carriage, landing on top of the Marquise of Jingning in a pose very offensive to public decency. And Fu Shen, living up to expectations, was at last knocked awake by him. Yan Xiaohan hadn't expected the sickly ghost to be able to rise from the dead even after fainting. He was just about to get angry when he happened to meet Fu Shen's eyes. There were still raindrops hanging from his eyelashes, on the point of falling. His gaze was unfocused. It actually looked as though he was about to cry. Though he knew very well that this was false, Lord Yan's anger was still extinguished in spite of himself. He got up and sat up straight. Quietly, he asked, "How about you come to my manor for now and let Shan Yisei have a look at your wounds?" He was a little concerned about the condition of Fu Shen's injuries. After all, he had been out in the pouring rain, kneeling on stone tiles for over 2 hours. Catching a chill was nothing to play around with. Fu Shen may or may not have understood. He gave an indistinct His eyes were half closed in weariness, and he didn't even have the strength to speak. He leaned against the wooden side of the carriage as if boneless. The carriage headed toward Yan Manor. The capital's roads were level, but Fu Shen was still jolted from side to side. Yan Xiaohan observed with rapt attention for a long time, then finally extended a tentative hand towards Fu Shen. As expected, before he could get close, the person who had his eyes closed, pretending to doze, struck like lightning, precisely grabbing him by the wrist. "What?" Yan Xiaohan said, "Does anything hurt?" Confusion flashed over Fu Shen's face. "Everything hurts. Why?" His fingers were icy cold. Abnormal warmth came from his palm. Yan Xiaohan sighed. He twisted his wrist and cleverly threw off his grip, then raised a hand to check the warmth of his forehead. "You're feverish." So feverish it burned his hand. But Fu Shen himself had no sense of it. He also reached out to feel. "But it's not hot?" Yan Xiaohan said, "That's my hand you're feeling." With the back of his hand as a fulcrum, Fu Shen turned around to face him and carelessly said, "It's nothing. I'll just sleep it off." He was used to toughing it out anyways. For minor illnesses and aches, he could go to sleep and be fine when he woke up. Unfortunately, this time the method seemed to have stopped working. On the way from the palace to Yan Manor, the imperfectly healed internal injuries and the chill he had taken from the pouring rain erupted at once into overbearing illness. Adding in his overtaxed energy and mental and physical exhaustion, Fu Shen was a little delirious from fever. When it was time to leave the carriage, he was completely unconscious and wouldn't wake no matter what. There was nothing Yan Xiaohan could do. He had to personally carry him inside. Princess Carrie already? What? Man, we're being spoiled this chapter. Each and every one of the servants awaiting him outside maintained a correct attitude, not daring to breathe loudly. Yan Xiaohan was a strict master. His servants were far more efficient than the gang of weak and crippled servants at the Marquis' manor. Soon they had readied bathing tubs and hot water, laid out clothing and blankets, and came to invite the two of them to bathe. Yan Xiaohan didn't feel comfortable delegating this task. He personally undressed Fu Shen. When his crimson official robe was removed, the soaked white inner robe stuck to him, affording a near complete view of the man's lean body. Unfortunately, Yan Xiaohan couldn't come up with any charming thoughts right now. All his attention was focused on Fu Shen's legs. Layer upon layer of bandages had been soaked through by the rain. When they were removed, the purple bruises and savage scars were simply shocking. Yan Xiaohan turned his eyes away, unable to bear another look. He bent down and picked him up, bent his legs, and cautiously placed him into the wooden tub filled with hot water. He was splashed all over by the water spilling out, but took no notice of his own state. Oh, dropping in really quick to say hi. Haven't been able to make a live stream yet, but have enjoyed watching everything after it's been recorded. Thanks so much for reading. Can't wait to listen later. Thank you so much, Peacock Pages. I really appreciate that, you saying that, but also you listening in. I really appreciate everyone that does, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Lord Marquis? Fu Shen. His fingers inadvertently brushed the side of Fu Shen's neck. All his black hair had been swept to the other side, revealing a light scar next to the artery. This location was dangerous enough to be frightening. Had it been just a sliver deeper, this person wouldn't have survived to be lying in one piece in the tub. Yan Xiaohan had only learned today how many scars Fu Shen had, old ones and new ones, never before revealed in front of others, like a historical record, all carved behind the history of being made a marquis while still young, of high spirits and daring. Suddenly, he understood what Fu Shen had meant by being unable to let it go, let it alone. If he had not once trusted the emperor, had not once placed the nation in his heart, what reason would there have been for him to put on heavy armor, go time after time onto the battlefield and towards almost certain death? Weren't the ancestral blessings of 3 dukes enough to let a wealthy and high-ranking young master live in comfort and ease? Yan Xiaohan called a young page from outside and pointed to the Marquis of Jinning in the tub. "Keep an eye out. Don't let him fall into the water." There was a screen in the bathing room separating 2 spaces. Yan Xiaohan went around to the other side, quickly rinsing himself clean, and wrung his hair dry with a towel, coiled it on top of his head with a hairpin, changed clothes, and then returned to Fu Shen's side. The young page had never seen him take such care of anyone. He couldn't resist stealthily looking on, inwardly amazed. Fu Shen's mind was in chaos from his fever. Only a portion of his consciousness was still clear. Feeling himself go all at once from ice-cold rain to warm water, he was so comfortable he was on the point of dozing off. But after a while, someone suddenly helped him up. A familiar voice said into his ear, "Come, put your arms around my neck." The scent of agarwood slowly spread, with a trace of indefinable seduction. As if bewitched, Fu Shen reached out his arms towards him. That person's arms applied slight pressure, holding his shoulders. Then there was a splash, and he was lifted out of the water. The instant his body left the warm water, cold came from all sides to envelop him. Fu Shen seems to have been tossed back into the desolate world of piercing wind and cold rain. He moaned indistinctly and unconsciously began to struggle, attempting to protect his vital parts curling into a ball. Yan Xiaohan nearly fell into the water from his sudden force. Before he could get angry, he got a clear look at Fu Shen's gesture and quickly called to the young page to bring over the blanket and wrapped him up tightly. "It's all right. Don't flail," he quietly soothed. "Are you still cold?" Fu Shen muttered something. Yan Xiaohan didn't hear it clearly. He drew closer. Fu Shen didn't speak again. His arms and legs slowly unfolded inside the warm blanket, but his brow was still tightly furrowed, as if he was making a supreme effort to endure. Yan Xiaohan considered his expression and tentatively said, "Does it hurt somewhere?" Fu Shen made a vague sound. Yan Xiaohan had meant to dress him, but now he absolutely didn't dare to move, thoughtlessly, afraid lest he touch some hidden wound. At just that moment, a report came from outside that Shen Yisei had arrived. So Yan Xiaohan had took Fu Shen, blanket and all, to the bedroom. Oh, that's not going to cause any misunderstandings at all. Oh, Shen Yisei saw him come in carrying Fu Shen, who on top of that had his hair loose and was undressed, and his eyeballs nearly popped out of his sockets from staring. Stop thatting. It's the Marquise of Jinning. Yan Xiaohan put Fu Shen on the bed. He spent 2 hours kneeling in the rain and passed out from fever earlier. Have a look. Can you bring him back to life? Shen Yisei thought that the frequency of the Marquise of Jinning's appearances had been rather high lately, but he didn't think too much of it. As he took Fu Shen's pulse, he said, "What happened? He can't even walk. Why would he get up and go kneel in the rain out of nowhere? Your Honor, were you also out in the rain just now? Have them prepare a bowl of ginger tea." Ooh, that sounds nice. Yan Xiaohan waved a hand irritably. He didn't want to mention that mess. Shen Yisei was very tactful. He didn't keep asking. He concentrated on taking Fu Shen's pulse from each of his hands, then lifted aside the blanket to have a look at his legs. He wrote out 3 prescriptions and sent someone to prepare the medicine, while he himself washed his hands with hard liquor and dressed Fu Shen's wounds anew. He cried out in pain before. "Do you think there are other injuries?" Yan Xiaohan asked, frowning. Shen Yisei suspected that the Imperial investigator's brain had been washed away by the autumn rain. He patiently explained, "Not even knees made of iron could take kneeling on the ground for 2 hours, never mind that his kneecaps have already been broken, and the injuries have yet to heal entirely. Getting them wet would cause them to swell and ache. Also," he continued, pointing out the window at the gloomy weather, "soldiers like the Marquise of Jinning all have some old wounds. This kind of weather is what they fear most. To tell the truth, if the average person were in this kind of pain, he would have been rolling around on the ground by now." At this, Yan Xiaohan sighed softly with emotion. The average person couldn't become him. Putting on armor and going out onto the battlefield before he was old enough for the capping ceremony, winning a wealth of military honors with his life at stake, keeping the peace at the northern frontier for years. Sadly, while he had dodged countless direct spears and hidden arrows, he hadn't dodged the knife coming from behind. to tell the truth. When Emperor Yuan Tai had brought up having him take over the Beiyuan cavalry, for an instant, Yan Xiaohan had indeed been excited. Though the Feilong Guard had a high position and great power, they were the target of curses from practically the whole court. However just and noble the Imperial Guard may have been, in the end, it was not a good place to make a brilliant career. Among the men of the times, who hadn't thought of holding power over the Beiyuan cavalry like Fu Shen, to gallop over battlefields, to wipe up the invading enemy? Who hadn't thought, if that were me, how they would put their aspirations to good use, what kind of brilliant career they would make? But was the position of commander of the Beiyuan army one that could be held merely through good luck? Yan Xiaohan knew that there was no way he could substitute for Fu Shen. There couldn't be another Fu Shen in the world. Sadly, Emperor Yuan Tai didn't understand this, and neither did the Crown Prince. Before the 10,000 li of the Great Wall could be destroyed at the hands of external enemies, they would be torn down by their own people. Your Honor, while Yan Xiaohan had been lost in thought, Shen Yisei had nimbly finished dressing Fu Shen's wounds. He spoke suddenly. While you perhaps are unwilling to take trouble on this account, as a doctor, I must still say something. The Marquis of Jinning's wounds, I fear, will never heal entirely. He has run a fever nearly twice recently, each time more dangerous than the one before. His body can no longer take any torment. After all, he is a hero. If you can help, don't let him struggle on his own. At least this business today of kneeling in the rain for 2 hours must not happen again. Yan Xiaohan's face showed no emotion. He only asked, Do I recall correctly that you aren't at all acquainted with Fu Shen? I never saw you speak on behalf of a patient before. Just take it as me being a busybody. Shen Yisei put the implements laid out on the table back into his medicine chest and closed it. Indeed, I have no friendship with the Marquis, but sometimes I think, as long as the Marquis of Jinning is alive and well out there, the capital will be safe, and we Han people will not end up fighting to survive under the iron heel of barbarians. Yan Xiaohan finally remembered that Shen Yisei came from Xuan King, which had suffered a massacre at the hands of the Eastern Tartars and had then been retaken by the Beiyuan cavalry. His parents, all of his family, had been killed. Only he had survived by a lucky chance, because he had been the youngest and his parents had hidden him in a medicine cabinet. Damn, if that's not a reason to become a doctor, I don't know what is. He didn't continue the conversation. He rose and saw Shen Yisei out. Sorry. The two of them walked through the winding corridors in silence. When they came to the central hall of the main courtyard, Shen Yisei stopped and saluted Yan Xiaohan in parting. You do not need to see me out, Your Honor. Jizzy, Yan Xiaohan called to stop him. He hesitated a moment, then asked a question he had been hesitating over. Fu Shen's injuries. How confident are you that you can make him stand again? Shen Yisei laughed bitterly. Your Honor, you have too high of an opinion of me. Say what there is to say, Yan Xiaohan said. There is no need to hold back. I want to hear the truth. Shen Yisei hesitated for a long moment, then, with utmost caution, said, there is only a 10 or 20% chance. It is easy to reconnect broken bones, but the damage to his veins and years, or especially his shattered kneecaps, will probably take 3 to 5 years of nursing. Never mind the expense and the medicines that this will take. The key is that there has to be someone with him to take care of him. But even so, it will still not necessarily be successful. But having a glimmer of hope was still better than being helpless in the face of a crisis. Yan Xiaohan nodded and came to a decision. That being the case, we'll do as you say. Starting tomorrow, you will treat the Marquise of Jinning's wounds. If you need to examine the wounds or apply medicine, you come to my manor. Chen Yise was astonished. Your Honor? No need to be shocked. You'll have to learn of it sooner or later, Yan Xiaohan said steadily. Just now, His Majesty ordered a decree arranging a marriage between me and the Marquise of Jingning. A bolt of lightning came crashing down. Chen Yise stood stock still, dumb as a wooden chicken. Shortly, an earth-shattering shout burst out of the main courtyard. Has His Majesty gone mad? All right, that is great, but I love the insult of stood dumb as a wooden chicken. That is phenomenal. All right, one quick sip, and then we will start chapter 10. Okay. Chapter 10. Shen Yise's expectations had been correct. This illness bore down menacingly upon Fu Shen. The cold was only the beginning. Under its influence, Fu Shen's internal and external injuries acted up together, nearly killing him. His fever held for 2 whole days and nights. He was dead to the world from illness. Yan Xiaohan used every means possible to reduce his temperature, rubbing him with hard liquor, laying cold towels on his forehead. He hardly had a chance to close his eyes. Luckily, after feeding him 3 bowls of medicine per day, in the end his efforts finally paid off. On the evening of the 3rd day, the hard, scorching heat at last gradually receded. While Fu Shen had yet to awake, his condition had stabilized. Yan Xiaohan could finally manage an uninterrupted night's sleep. And Fu Shen's energy had been completely sapped by this illness. He was unconscious for another full day. But that night he came thoroughly awake in the middle of the night. With the dead of night, not a sound to be heard. The room was dim. The bed and curtains were quite different from the arrangements he was familiar with. There was only one lantern on the table, lighting a small area around it, as if obscured by fine gauze. He caught the faint sound of breathing, turned his head, and found that beside the bed a low cot was laid out. Yan Xiaohan was curled up with his back towards him, sleeping fully dressed. The tumultuous memories from a few days earlier slowly returned to his mind, but they could no longer raise billowing waves. They had all turned into a hidden current, surging below the surface, constantly sinking into the unfathomable depths. Fu Shen's whole body hurt from laying down too long. He wanted to roll over to relax his stiff and aching back. He hadn't expected that as soon as he moved, Yan Xiaohan would wake. He rolled over, sat up, and reached out to help him up. Because he wasn't completely awake yet, when he spoke, his voice was unusually soft and low. What is it? Do you want water, or do you want to relieve yourself? He was sitting sideways on the edge of the bed, one hand holding Fu Shen's arm, the other on his back, so he naturally leaned down and pressed their foreheads together, checking the temperature. That's all right. No more fever. You've run me ragged. I've been there with the whole body aching thing. I had some eye issues, and you can't move if, like, for days after you have the corrective surgery. So you have to hold your head basically like this, and like you can't run, you can't jump, you can't do that. So like when he says full body soreness, like if you lay too long, your body and your muscles will physically seize up, and like it's not even the injury that's in pain anymore. Like it's not just annoying, it is physically painful. So like add on injuries to that, and I feel for this guy. He is literally a real trooper to be dealing with this. All right. Fu Shen had no memories from his illness. He had no idea that he had been receiving such good treatment. At the outset, he almost didn't understand. When he realized something was off, he immediately leaned back to avoid him. It's fine. What time is it? Can you help me sit up for a while? The sleepiness gradually faded, and Yao Shahan's eyes finally became clear. He silently helped Fu Shen sit up, leaning against the headboard, and took 3 steps back and sat back down on the low cot, putting a polite and unfamiliar distance between them. The atmosphere was awkward. The two of them seemed to wake simultaneously from a mental breakdown. Without prearrangement, they dispelled distractions and remembered that between them lay a preposterous arranged marriage. No matter how powerful its political implications, and regardless of whether it was an out-and-out conspiracy, however unsuitable a romantic match might be, even between two men, that did not alter its basic nature. It was still a marriage. It's after midnight. Today is the 11th day of the 10th month, Yan Xiaohan said. You've been sick for several days. He hadn't said much, but at this slight reminder, certain blurred but tender scenes suddenly flashed through Fu Shen's mind. The Marquise of Jinning, who had just been entirely at peace, once again felt the beginnings of a headache. He had thought that he was a person very capable of bearing things, but now he only wanted to lose his memory, wanted to start over, pretend that nothing had happened. You've gone to a lot of trouble. Yan Xiang. Yang Xiang. Go back to sleep. There is no need to mind me. Xiaoyang. Yan Xiaohan didn't answer him. Instead, he carelessly coiled his hair, picked up an outer robe from the bedside, and tossed it to him. The nights are cold. Put this on. Are you hungry? I'll have someone bring porridge. A man like Fu Shen, with an aristocratic background, famous since a young age, growing up amid a heap of praise and worship, after seeing too much of this, could easily become unusually obtuse towards the idea of someone being good to him. But perhaps because of the influence of that wretched arranged marriage, or because a major illness made a person's heart unusually sensitive. From this series of actions, what he first sensed was actually Yan Xiaohan's quiet thoughtfulness. He awkwardly thought to himself, he really does have some wifely virtues. With a single thought gone astray, all the lines of thinking that followed involuntarily strayed as well. Considering appearances alone, Fu Shen was forced to acknowledge that Yan Xiaohan was even a little more remarkable than him. He had changed out of the dark blue official robe of the Feilong Guard and was wearing a pale green, wide-sleeved old robe for homewear. When he stood to brighten the oil lamp, his dark hair slid down from his shoulders in front of his chest like flowing water, His eyelids were lowered wearily, as if his drowsiness had yet to fade, and his lips still turned up slightly at the corners when he wasn't smiling. In the lamplight, the lines of his face were mild and soft, letting a person temporarily forget his identity, wallowing entirely in the pale and smudged light and shadow. So, aesthetically, it sounds like he's not entirely opposed, necessarily, based on descriptive elements. Fu Shen narrowed his eyes and looked him over repeatedly from head to toe, totally unaware of how much he resembled an ill-intentioned hoodlum. When Yan Xiaohan turned and went out, he pulled the door shut behind him, smiling as he walked down the corridor. Perhaps the fever had left Fu Shen confused. He'd been staring at him with absolutely no restraint. He probably hadn't realized how invasive his gaze was. Yan Xiaohan had even felt his clothing about to melt under his stare. At last, he really couldn't take it anymore. He'd had to flee in defeat. Anyway, the servant keeping vigil saw him leave the room smiling brightly and thought that Fu Shen had breathed his last. Otherwise, how could his master be as happy as if he had gone senile? When the warm porridge was brought, the two of them, after having been possessed, finally returned to normal. Fu Shen sat across from Yan Xiaohan, holding a bowl in both hands. The heat brought a bit of color to his pale lips and cheeks, managed to straighten his spine. At last they could calmly observe the bumpy road ahead, covered with thistles and thorns, and consider where they ought to step. Yan Xiaohan spat out the tea he was using to rinse his mouth, put his tea bowl back on the table, and spoke first. "Lord Marquis." Fu Shen was still slowly drinking his porridge. Yan Xiaohan said, "I have some questions that I hope you can clear up for me." "Listen, Lord Yan." Fu Shen put down his spoon and carelessly crooked the corners of his mouth. We're grasshoppers tied to the same string, so you can stop Lord Marquis this and Lord Marquis that-ing. You're being very distant. There was a tacit understanding implied by this mockery. Yan Xiaohan had to admit that while Fu Shen was rather stubborn in some respects, the majority of the time he was still relatively candid and clever. Having dealings with a smart person like this, he didn't need to beat around the bush too much. "Since you say so, then very well," Yan Xiaohan said, coming to terms. "Jing Yun, from what His Majesty said the other day, it seems that he is extremely dissatisfied with you. Did you recently go behind his back to do something that offended His Majesty?" Don't use such an intimate address either." Having choked himself, Fu Shen helplessly said, "Can't you just use my full name?" Yan Xiaohan's smile was fulsome. He didn't give way at all. "We're going to be married. Take it as acclimating early." This numbed Fu Shen so much he lost his appetite. He put the bowl of porridge aside and said, sighing, "It's a long story. Were you born when His Majesty ascended the throne?" Yan Xiaohan raised his eyebrows. "I had just been born." "Why?" "The origin of this business predates that," Fu Shen said. "The late emperor had 9 sons, and the one most favored by the late emperor back then, as well as the one with the greatest hope of inheriting the throne, was the 5th prince, His Highness Prince Ying. Prince Ying and the 3rd prince, the present Prince Su of the 1st rank, were brothers with the same mother. My second uncle used to be His Highness Prince Su's study companion. The two of them grew up together. They were as close as brothers. So Uncle and Prince Ying were also very close. To be overly familiar, he really saw him as a little brother. Yan Xiaohan thought there was something strange about his hesitation midway, but he didn't pursue it. Fu Shen said, "The late emperor fell ill suddenly during a stay outside the capital. Only the eldest prince and his majesty had accompanied him then. After the late emperor passed away, his testamentary edict was read out by the imperial instructor Yang Gong. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the throne ultimately passed to His Majesty. When His Majesty was first enthroned, quite a few people called the authenticity of that testamentary edict into question, because Yang Gong and the present empress are close relatives from the same clan. There were also those who contacted Prince Su and Prince Ying in private, attempting to plot an armed rebellion. His Majesty seemed to be aware of it, and therefore, the year after ascending the throne, he sent Prince Ying to a fiefdom. In the second year of Yuan Tai, the Eastern Tartars, Alma tribe, invaded Great Zhou, and the place that bore the brunt was Prince Ying's fiefdom of Ningzhou. The border forces were weak then. The barbarians marched straight in, unchallenged. Prince Ying led his Manor's guard in resisting the Eastern Tartar cavalrymen and went missing after several days of fierce struggle. Prince Su and my second uncle were searchers that were sent in multiple directions, but ultimately came up with nothing. Under the circumstances, it was very unlikely that he had survived. Over time, this matter slowly faded from people's memories. No one mentions it now. But they never gave up looking for Prince Ying. After Uncle passed away, it fell to me. Fu Shen smiled. Who could have thought that heaven never leaves people without hope? I really did find Prince Ying's child. Yan Xiaohan was astonished. When Prince Ying died in battle, one of his concubines was pregnant. She was captured by the Eastern Tartars. Because she was beautiful and sophisticated, they actually let her live. And later, she became a favored concubine of a powerful official in the Eastern Tartar tribe. She preserved the last drop of Prince Ying's blood. She wanted to take the child and escape back to Great Zhou, but sadly she was picked up midway by Uji herdsmen and had to hide her name and identity, pretending that she was a Han woman who had been bought. Give herself to the head of the Yuji tribe, Hatu. More fortunately, not long after she escaped, the entire Alma tribe was destroyed. There was no one left on Earth who knew her original identity. This remarkable woman outlived the previous head of the Yuji tribe and was now among the highest nobles of the Eastern Tartars. Now that I've said this, you ought to know already who she is. The Eastern Tartars' previous head, Hatu's, their current head's Orsi's wife, Yan Xiaohan whispered. Hush, Khatun. It's really her? Fu Shen said. Prince Ying's given name was Hun, a kind of jade, and Hash means jade in the Eastern Tartar language. Yan Xiaohan said, So where is Prince Ying's child? Fu Shen said it was the battle of the Qinchi Pass. Zaichi Pass. There you go. I hadn't wanted to interfere, but Hash Khatun sent a trusted aide to Baiyun to see me, asked me to take Prince Ying's child back to Great Zhou. So I passed on a message to Prince Su. During the 5th month, he personally came to Baiyuan to see the envoy. He determined that Hash Khatun had indeed come from Prince Ying's household. Yan Xiaohan said, "So you agreed?" As if he had closed the most critical link, cause and effect automatically laid itself out in an instant. All the things that had happened in the past suddenly had a clear sequence. You agreed to what the Khatun asked, and the compensation she gave you was the Yuji tribe begging to surrender. So they could legitimately stay in Great Zhao, she placed Prince Ying's child with the Eastern Tartar diplomatic mission accompanying the youngest prince to the capital. Isn't that right? Yan Xiaohan stared at Fu Shen's legs. But the Eastern Tartar diplomatic mission was ambushed in the Qinsha Gap. There were no survivors. Fu Shen softly said, "What do you think? Does His Majesty know about this?" The Feilong Guard were the Emperor's eyes and ears, the sovereign's thugs. If even Yan Xiaohan hadn't known something, how could His Majesty know it? But if His Majesty didn't know it, why would he be so insistent on getting rid of Fu Shen? Perhaps His Majesty has great trust in you, mockery flashed in Fu Shen's eyes. But maybe he hasn't given you all of his trust, Lord Yan. This was his true objective in holding out and telling this story, despite his sick body. Yan Xiaohan had meant to test Fu Shen's depths, not expecting that Fu Shen would strike back by sowing discord. Neither of them understood the other's true thoughts. Yan Xiaohan suspected that Fu Shen had a backup plan, and Fu Shen was on guard against Yan Xiaohan taking the emperor's side. The two of them spoke candidly, but in secret it was one probing attempt after another, non-stop. Neither dared to give his entire trust, even though they were both already standing on the same damaged ship in imminent peril. Yan Xiaohan blurted out not remotely sincere praise. "The Lord Marquis is very crafty." "My deliberations are not as comprehensive as Lord Yan's," Fu Shen returned the compliment. He very deliberately said, "I can also tell you one more thing. I did not leave Yanshao and return to the capital entirely because of the injuries to my legs. It was also because my people made new arrangements for the route the diplomatic mission was to travel. Arrangements that had slight discrepancies from what the Tartars knew. Among those discrepancies were the Qinsha Gap. And among the Eastern Tartar diplomatic mission, there was a 22-year-old envoy with Han blood." Yan Xiaohan said, "The Lord Marquis is suggesting that His Majesty has a spy in the Baiyuan army?" Fu Shen said, "The Eastern Tartars didn't know that we had changed the itinerary, and the Baiyuan army, which arranged the route, didn't know that the Eastern Tartars had a different itinerary. This double-sided plan was privately settled on between Prince Su and me in the interest of security. Speaking plainly, only the two of us knew that the Eastern Tartars and the Baiyuan cavalry had two different itineraries. At the outset, his objective in making all these arrangements had actually been to take precautions against plots by the Eastern Tartars, not expecting that in the end he would take a tumble along the route only his people knew about. The bolt in the Qinsha Gap had shot through the piece that had been plastered over for many years, and it had completely penetrated the long-buried fear in Emperor Yuntai's heart. Fu Shen smiled. "Do you know, among the Baiyuan army, what kind of people could take part in an assignment concerning Prince Ying? Those with long service records, with high positions, with the right to speak. individuals who had the rank of general at the very least. In arranging this marriage for me, His Majesty was purely concerned about Baiyuan's military authority. So he went looking among the dwarves for a general and picked you, right? Fu Shen said unblushingly. Lord Yan, well, I've had enough of occupying this lousy position. On account of your kind intentions in sheltering me, I still have to give you a word of advice. Don't be fooled by the fact that His Majesty trusts you now. Once you've taken this position, that will no longer be a certainty. A majority of the Baiyuan army is made up of my trusted subordinates, and a majority is made up of His Majesty's one spy. Minority is made up of His Majesty's one spy. That spy isn't on your team. If all my trusted subordinates go to seek refuge with you, then you'll be the next Fu Shen. If my trusted subordinates are unwilling to rely on you, then you'll be nothing but a figurehead, and His Majesty can never permit you and that spy to team up. He isn't only taking precautions against me. He's taking precautions against everyone. Ooh. All right. Chapter 11. First, tea break. Feel my throat already starting to burn. Burn, baby, burn. All right. Chapter 11. The room sank into silence. The atmosphere gradually turned cold. Yan Xiaohan had his eyes lowered, deep in thought. From his peripheral vision, he glimpsed Fu Shen turn his head away and give a tiny yawn. He seemed to be sleepy. Only then did he remember that Fu Shen was still sick. If they spent half the night scheming against each other, when Shen Yixi found out tomorrow, he would be certain to nag again. Forget it. Go to sleep. If there's anything we need to talk about, we'll talk tomorrow. Yan Xiaohan went over and helped him lie down and lower the curtains. Fu Shen gave a heavily laden with the sleepiness and softly said, You've gone to a lot of trouble. Thank you. Yan Xiaohan sat back down on the low cot beside the bed, but all his sleepiness was gone. Fu Shen's words turned over and over in his mind. No wonder Emperor Yuntai wanted to beat Fu Shen down so urgently. Having private contact with the Khatun of a foreign nation, bringing Prince Ying's child back to the Central Plains, each of these seemed like an omen of rebellion. The past struggle over succession was even more of a sore spot in Emperor Yuntai's heart. Anyone who touched it died. Fu Shen had simply been gambling with his life. Broken legs and arranged marriage counted as a lucky break. For the sake of the unfulfilled wish of a predecessor, doing a job you would lose your head over, Fu Shen had to have known what would happen to him once this was exposed. But he seemed always to be doing difficult and thankless tasks like this. Why? There are some things in the world that have to be done by someone, Fu Shen said. Yan Xiaohan roused from his musings with a start. Why are you awake? Lord Yan, Fu Shen said derisively. If you'd kept staring at me like that, it would have been enough to bring a dead man back to life. Yan Xiaohan had only been focused on his wandering thoughts. He hadn't noticed that his gaze had been resting the whole time on Fu Shen. Fu Shen had taken one look at his regretful expression and known what he was thinking. He couldn't resist feeling a softness at heart, and he had wanted to tease him. Finding Prince Ying's child was the wish of my second uncle and His Highness Prince Su, so I would have done it no matter what the price to be paid. There's nothing to regret. Yan Xiaohan asked, and your grave injuries and wasted efforts, aren't those worth regretting? Fu Shen's soft laugh sounded in the night. Yan Xiaohan startled, then suddenly saw the light. The two routes for the first smokescreen. The Han envoy with the Eastern Tartars diplomatic mission was the second smokescreen. Actually, you and Prince Su had already sent Prince Ying's child away, right? Yes. Fu Shen nodded with a show of eagerness. If all our efforts had truly gone to waste, as you said, I figure I would have drowned myself in a river by now. I truly wouldn't have had the face to go on living. Holding back a smile, he raised his eyes to look at Yan Xiaohan. Stop pulling a long face, Lord Yan. I had no idea you felt such tenderness towards me. Truly, I am ashamed. Yan Xiaohan didn't know which eye Fu Shen had used to see tenderness written on his face, but he knew he was being flirted with, so he said rather coolly, No need for politeness. You're quite welcome. After all, we're going to be family soon. Fu Shen was pointedly silent. You really can't leave well enough alone. He simply didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You'll use any self-injuring tactic to take down an enemy. Are you that willing to be family with me, huh? Lord Marquise, you have to think it through, Yan Xiaohan said patiently. You are of upper first rank, and I am of upper third rank. If we truly become family, I actually won't be losing out. In fact, I'll be profiting. Fu Shen choked on his words and was rendered speechless. Seeing that he was taking a breath in preparation for flaring up at him, Yan Xiaohan decided he had done enough and made a timely concession. In reconsolation, he said, All right, it'll be light soon, and you've just gotten better. Don't wear yourself out. Go to sleep. Fu Shen's bristling fur instantly smoothed. He knew very well that Yan Xiaohan was mollifying him, but he couldn't resist feeling a little bit of drowsiness on hearing his gentle words. The two of them chattered on and off, whispering for half the night, only briefly lying down to rest at the fourth watch of the night. At dawn, the water clock outside counted off the watches. Yan Xiaohan cocked his ear to listen carefully and rose quickly from the low cot, not expecting that as soon as he stirred, Fu Shen would immediately wake as well. But he wasn't fully awake yet. He blearily asked, Are you going? Yes. Yan Xiaohan went to the bedside. First, he felt his forehead. Speaking of not awake yet, and determined that he couldn't have a fever, then attentively smoothed out a turned-up corner of the quilt. When he bent over, his loose hair slid down to the pillow and gently brushed the side of Fu Shen's face. I have to go to the palace to stand my shift today. Go back to sleep. Eyes closed, Fu Shen made a vague nasal sound. That lock of hair softly stroked his cheek. A small breeze fluttered the gauze curtain at the head of the bed. He heard the sound of footsteps growing distant, the screen in front of the bed being turned, the rustling sounds coming from outside. For a person with acute senses, even through several doors, these fragmentary sounds were still very bothersome. In spite of himself, Fu Shen pricked up his ears to hear the quiet sounds of water, footsteps, voices, objects being picked up and put down. There was also Yan Xiaohan's deliberately lowering his voice and instructing, "Don't bother him, Shen Yisei will come in the afternoon. Give him meals and medicine according to the schedule." Perhaps because there was someone worrying about him, or maybe because of the cheerfulness that came of the comparison that my colleagues all have to go to court, but I can stay home and sleep in. The temporary noisiness didn't spoil his good mood. As Fu Shen waited for Yan Xiaohan to leave, he kept his eyes closed, fermenting drowsiness. I have never heard someone mention going back to sleep or trying to stay sleepy as fermenting drowsiness. That I guess technically it's used correctly, but that just sounds so strange. Out of some association, or perhaps because he had sensed something in his days, a familiar line of poetry suddenly emerged in his mind. Spring nights in the capital, when winter night has gone, bring dread. Though General Fu was a young aristocrat, his erudition was truly limited. Everything he had studied had long since been returned to his teacher. He actually couldn't remember the first line of this couplet. He vaguely recalled this poem was about not wanting to get out of bed, and this verse just happened to contain the characters of Yan Xiaohan's name. So he whispered it over and over several times until the noises outside quieted. He once again sank into sleep, where he still was unable to let it go. When he had slept until late in the morning, washed, dressed, and eaten, attended by a Yan manner maid, then clenched his teeth and forced himself to gulp down a big bowl of bitter medicinal soup, Fu Shen still hadn't remembered the full name of that poem. He was the kind of person who would get stuck when there was anything he didn't understand, have to get to the bottom of it. Fu Shen sat by the window, pondering at length, then at last simply said to the maid, "Go to your master's study and bring some poetry anthologies, one with heptasyllabic quatrains." Apparently I'm done, because I know what a quatrain is, but the heptasyllabic... Hui. The maid had received Yan Xiaohan's instructions in the morning and didn't dare to slight Fu Shen. She quickly picked up her skirt and went to find the books. Yan Xiaohan wasn't a man of culture, either. There wasn't much poetry in his study. The maid brought Fu Shen a small stack of books and respectfully said, "Lord Marquis, these are all the poetry anthologies in the study." Fu Shen picked up one and flipped through it. While he flipped, he actually said disdainfully, "Uncultured." The maid had her head lowered. Her shoulders shook suspiciously a couple times. After flipping through the stack of poetry anthologies for nearly 2 hours, Fu Shen finally found the origin of the verse that had perplexed him for so long in a dusty and yellowed selection of Tang Dynasty poems. The title of this poem was "In View," and the full poem read, "In view of the exquisite beauty behind the caverned screen. Spring nights in the capital, when winter cold has gone, bring dread. Senselessly she married an official of the Golden Tortoise, who must attend morning court and abandon her sweet bed." Fu Shen's face turned green. He nearly got a stitch in his side. He tossed the book aside furiously. When Yao Xiaohan left court and came home in the evening, Fu Shen was at the window staring blankly at the writing utensils on the desk when he entered. He had a mind to lighten his footsteps. When Fu Shen looked up and saw him, a threatening line who must attend morning court and abandon her sweet bed, immediately began to echo endlessly in his mind. His expression changed several times. He breathed in wrong and instantly burst into earth-shattering coughs. Yan Xiaohan was startled. He quickly went over to pat him on the back. "What's wrong? Did I scare you?" Spoken aloud, this question was absurd. Fu Shen waved a hand, clutching Yan Xiaohan's forearm and coughing incessantly. Yan Xiaohan observed him briefly. When he saw that there didn't seem to be anything wrong with him and he had only accidentally choked, his suspended heart finally fell back down into his stomach. He couldn't resist saying ironically, "Lord Marquis, you truly are steady." Fu Shen tossed his arm aside. "I'm so sorry about the yawns." One sitting and one standing, their two tall and slender shadows were cast on the ornately latticed window like two figures of jade. Fu Shen's coughing finally stilled. Yan Xiaohan casually asked, "Are you comfortable staying here? If there's anything you need, just tell the servants. Don't restrain yourself. I heard you threw a book today. What happened? Can you tell me about it?" Fu Shen's expression didn't waver. My hand slipped. Yan Xiaohan was doubtful. "Really? If the servants have offended you, you don't need to hold back on my account." Fu Shen looked at him askance. "How much esteem do you think I have for you that it would be worth my while to swallow insult?" So Yan Xiaohan didn't pursue it further. Inwardly, he laughed, thinking that perhaps he had thought Fu Shen too frail. A person who lived amid piercing wind and biting frost, who could still say, "There are actions he takes and actions he must not take," must have greater endurance than people like him, who went with the tide. In this world, hot blood would cool, lofty ideals would be lost, heroes and cowards would at last both be interred in the earth. Praises and scorn would all turn to nothingness. There was no sense in demanding things of others, so he had never cared about other people. But now Yan Xiaohan was finding that he could not act contrary to common practice. He hoped that this person's utter sincerity and unbending backbone would be slow to wear away. "Did anything happen at the palace today?" Fu Shen casually gathered the brushes and paper scattered on the desk. Yan Xiaohan replied, "The news has already spread, though at present everyone is watching and waiting. I hear that the Imperial Censorate is planning to submit a memorial to the throne on your account. After all, you knelt in front of the palace gates for a long time that day, reflected on His Majesty. How do your leg injuries feel? Do they still hurt now? Did you run a fever today?" "There's nothing much the matter. Mr. Shen came in the afternoon," Fu Shen said. "An arranged marriage is a private affair, after all. If you and I say nothing, no one else is in a position to speak. Don't you think so?" "Oh my God." Yan Xiaohan said, "I already agreed to His Majesty's face. I can't go back on my word." Fu Shen muttered to himself briefly. He didn't speak openly, only said, "Fine, I understand." Yan Xiaohan glanced out of his peripheral vision at the messy scrap paper on the desk. It was covered in incomprehensible scribbles that Fu Shen had put down. He curiously picked up a sheet and asked Fu Shen, "Can I look at this?" Fu Shen thought nothing of it. "As you like." Only by looking closely at the scribbles on the paper could they be discerned to be altered characters, something like a signature. Fu Shen saw him looking earnestly at them and casually asked, "Do you recognize them?" Yan Xiaohan pointed at one of them. "This military character is the signature of the Military Arms Office. All the weapons made by the Military Arms Office have this imprint. There's a pair of black hooks on this stroke you've drawn which resemble an arrow. You can see at a glance that this comes from the Military Arms Office's crossbow workshop." At the outset, Fu Shen had been absent-minded. When he heard the words "Military Arms Office," his pupils contracted sharply. Forcing himself to hold back, he said, "But the arrows used by the Beiyuan army have always been unmarked. I've never seen a signature like this." Yan Xiaohan patiently explained to him, "Ordinary arrows used by the military are numerous and coarse. They are often manufactured by a local crafting office of the Ministry of Works. They're irregular, some are signed and some are unsigned, but the Military Arms Office is different. They are primarily responsible for trying out new weapons, as well as manufacturing all kinds of weapons for use by the capital forces. So only bows and arrows used by the capital's troops will have the mark of the Military Arms Office's crossbow workshop." Fu Shen pulled out another sheet of paper and drew a symbol like a running wild beast. "What about this one? Do you recognize it?" Yan Xiaohan smiled. He bent down and picked up a brush, indicating for Fu Shen to hold the paper steady for him. He wrote a smoother symbol that was better representation. "This is a leopard character drawn in a single stroke. During the previous dynasty, before the Imperial Guard split up, the Imperial City's forces consisted of only 10 guard squadrons, those being the left and right Jinwu, Bao Tao, Luan Yi, Yin Yang, and Yulin. For the sake of convenience, each branch of the Imperial Guard at that time was represented by an animal. Slightly altering the form of the first character of their names, they became special symbols." As he explained, he wrote and drew on the paper. For example, the Jinwu had the character gold as a three-legged crow. The Bao Tao's was written like this. The Luan Yi had the character for the Luan bird in the shape of a phoenix. The Yin Yang had an eagle character, and the Yulin had a feather character in the shape of a crane. But later, as the Imperial Guard split up and expanded into the 10 South Yemen Guards and the 6 North Yemen Corps, they set up the symbols. The set of symbols fell out of use. What makes you suddenly ask about this? Okay. Tea break. I think I might also go grab the energy drink that's over there. It'll literally take me a minute. I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Okay. I was gonna try and do this without an energy drink, but that was apparently a mistake. Okay. Sippy sip of this. And let's hope that pumps it up. All right. Bao Tao, Fu Shen muttered. What's wrong? Said Yan Xiaohan. It's nothing, Fu Shen said. Yang Xian, Before he could finish, a servant's report suddenly came from outside the door. Master, Beiyuan's General Xiansun has come to visit. He's waiting at the gate. Xiaosun. Come to see you. Yan Xiaohan. Xiaosun. It's gonna bug me. He turned, pulled the brush out of Fu Shen's hand. When he had spoken, he turned his head and instructed the person outside. Ask him to come in. The Lord Marquis will go over. Fu Shen turned his wheelchair, intending to go out. Yan Xiaohan blocked him. Wait, what's the rush? He went into an inner room, got a cloak, and wrapped Fu Shen up tightly. Only then did he head out, pushing the wheelchair from behind. Without dwelling on how proper and meticulous he was, when they came to the threshold on the way out, he could even pick up Fu Shen, wheelchair and all, and carry him over, saving a considerable amount of trouble. Fu Shen's feelings at being looked after by him were complicated. He felt a little embarrassed, but also a little gratified. His and Yan Xiaohan's relationship was very delicate. Whoops, we almost skipped entirely to the next chapter. Though they had started arguing as soon as they met before, in private, they had still just about managed to be friends. But now that they had been shoved into the most intimate of relationships, each of them had their own reservations. Sometimes they were more alienated than before. But no matter what, on the surface, at least they had to get along. On the subject of worldly wisdom, Fu Shen was ashamed of his own inferiority. Had their two positions been reversed, he had reached the conclusion that he couldn't have been as conscientious as Yan Xiaohan. Going deeper, he had never imagined receiving treatment like this after being injured, with someone sitting vigil beside him half the night, remembering to get a cloak for him before going outside. Like a poor child who had suddenly been given a big ingot of silver and had never seen so much money in his life, he had been taken unawares and was entirely at a loss. That's kind of sad, that someone taking the basic care and caring really confused him. After just a few days, he could hardly recognize the expression false displays of affection anymore. In the main hall, Zhao Zun saw Fu Shen sitting in a wheelchair, pushed inside by Yan Xiaohan. His expression curdled at once. That day, he had taken people straight to the East City's Poplar Canal to search for Wang Goer, but he had found only a dilapidated 2-room thatched cottage, abandoned. This had just happened to coincide with the heavy rain pouring from the sky. They had been trapped in the village. The big dog kept behind the Wang house had barked incessantly. Zhao Zun had thought something was wrong, so he had let the dog hold their clothes in its mouth and led them to Shanhua Mountain behind the village. 3 of them had hunted around for half the night and had at last found the corpses of Wang Goer, his whole family, in the depths of the mountain. When they had carried the corpses back to the village and notified the local authorities, temporarily setting things there, Zhao Zun had immediately galloped back to the city to report to Fu Shen. Before he had even gone through the Marquis Manor main gate, he had been knocked silly by news of His Majesty arranging the marriage of Fu Shen kneeling in front of the palace gates at length, and of Yan Xiaohan taking him back to his manor. For some days after, Yan Xiaohan had been busy looking after Fu Shen and had no attention to spare. He had specifically instructed that he would receive no guests. Zhao Zun had been refused at Yan Manor's door many times. His experiences had been varied and fraught. Well, when at last he saw their Lord Marquis in person, he was simply physically and emotionally exhausted. He would have loved to fall down in front of Fu Shen and cry. Zhao Zun jumped out of his chair. "General!" Fu Shen nodded slightly towards him. His manner was steady. He seemed entirely unruffled, as though having a marriage arranged for him, being locked up by his sworn enemy in his home, had had no impact on him. He even seemed to be enjoying himself a little. Zhao Zun stood there and watched as Yan Xiaohan pushed the wheelchair in front of him and leaned down to whisper something into Fu Shen's ear. His attitude was intimate, speaking of a rather close relationship. The main hall is large. Burning coal doesn't get it as warm as the inner rooms. Keep it on. Don't be rowdy. General Zhao, who had experienced hundreds of battles, closed his eyes and firmly pinched himself on the thigh. Damn it, that hurt. You two chat. I'll have them prepare the medicine. Yan Xiaohan voluntarily found an excuse to leave, leaving the space to the two of them. Before he left, he poured Fu Shen a cup of tea to warm his hands with, and took the opportunity to glance at the ashen-faced General Zhao with a not-quite smile. The stars were resplendent, the night sky clear, as if it had been rinsed. Yan Xiaohan stood under an osmanthus tree in the courtyard, pinching some fragments of wilted blossoms between his fingertips, thinking with his eyes half closed. Emperor Yuntai wanted to use him to transfer Beiyuan's military authority from Fu Shen's hands. This transfer wouldn't be as simple as getting rid of Fu Shen. The Beiyuan cavalry, passing through generations of the Fu family, had become an unspoken rule. If Fu Shen were to, unfortunately, pass away, the authority would fall back to the Duke of Ying Manor. The current Duke of Ying, Fu Tingyi, was unskilled in military affairs, and his future heir, Fu Ya, was a useless rich kid. Whichever of them took the position, it would be a good thing for Emperor Yuntai. Thinking about it like this, the timing of the Qingsha Gap assassination attempt was truly too convenient. But Fu Shen was extremely hardy. Emperor Yuntai had had to settle for second best. The Marquis of Jingning could on no account have issue. Who knew whether a son of his would be as accomplished as his father in the future? The only opportunity to strike was afforded by Fu Shen's future marriage. If Yan Xiaohan married Fu Shen, he would count as halfway to a member of the Fu family. This amounted to a smooth transitional measure. The only difference lay in whether Yan Xiaohan could make Fu Shen bring him into the circle of his people. Watching Fu Shen's manner these last few days, he could sense that Fu Shen intended to dissolve the alliance between Yan Xiaohan and Emperor Yuntai. But he hadn't displayed the intent to take the next step and draw him over to his own side. Fu Shen appeared to have other plans, But right now, he had absolutely no ability to act. It didn't seem like he could stir up events, turn the world on its head. Moreover, his arms and legs were bound by shackles called morality and justice. Today, the Ministry of Rites had already set about calculating the date of the wedding. The next step was to send someone to verify their horoscopes, complete the 6 etiquettes. Perhaps the mutual probing ought to end. He needed to speak openly with Fu Shen. So, I know a lot of people probably know this already, but what they're talking about there is in ancient China or ancient Asia, they would have the Ministry of Rites or people in that know-how divine when the most fruitful day of the wedding would be. They would have like a set of it, and both parties would have to agree on the most fortuitous date, or matchmakers would agree. It depends on who's arranging it. So, and verifying their horoscopes, so they would take the time they were born, the day they were born, what phase, what time of year, and if it's the whole like, do you match up? It's that, are you a Capricorn? Are you a Libra? Are you a Aquarius? Etc. Etc. And it's literally specific to like the time of day. It's not just, oh, I'm this because of the month. It's like so much more specific and could basically determine your whole life. Like, so there were lucky and unlucky ones. People would be called things like jinxes. Or unlucky stars if they had unfavorable horoscopes. Just a little fun fact of history. Because I think it's fascinating. But yeah, so in this case, like, it wouldn't matter. The Emperor's pushing it, so it might just manage to work out, or it could. You never know. Anyway, in the contest between Emperor Yun Tai and the commander of the Beiyuan court, he couldn't only be a game piece to be pushed this way and that. A game piece had dignity, too. Wrapped in chill, he stood in the night with osmanthus flowers slowly drifting over his head, as if separated from the world by a screen. There seemed to be an indescribable loneliness about his silhouette. A long time after, the main hall's doors were opened from inside. Zhao Zun, visibly startled when he saw him standing in the courtyard. Suspicion immediately appeared on his face. Fu Shen was plainly even further away, but the distance was no match for his eyesight. He saw Yan Xiaohan at a glance. Their gazes met gently in midair, then slid apart like two swimming fish. Yan Xiaohan patted non-existent dust off his sleeve and languidly walked around Zhao Zun into the room. In a natural manner, he asked, "Finished with your talk? Should we see off the guest?" As he walked, cold air came right at Fu Shen. He felt a little unhappy. How long were you standing outside? Yan Xiaohan obviously misunderstood him. He laughed softly. With 2 skilled soldiers of the Beiyuan army here, how could I dare to run a risk? I see you've been frozen witless, Fu Shen mocked, pushing the hot tea on the table towards him. But Yan Xiaohan snatched the cup from in front of Fu Shen and said deliberately, smiling, "Thank you for your consideration, Lord Marquis." "That's my cup," said Fu Shen. "I'm just warming my hands. I wasn't about to drink it." There was sincere innocence all over Yan Xiaohan's face. "What were you thinking, Lord Marquis?" "You're so sassy." Fu Shen didn't respond. Zhao Zun, his emotions complicated, watched the two of them banter flirtatiously. No. Give measure for measure as though no one were around. If not for the fact that he had many years of understanding Fu Shen to go off, and knew that he didn't have those kinds of interests, he practically would have thought that their ruse had turned into reality. General, he said to Fu Shen, stepping forward and suppressing his feelings of strangeness. Since this matter has been taken care of for the time being, why not return to the manor to rest? The carriage is waiting outside the gate. No. Two cases turned in unison towards the speaker. Fu Shen even raised his eyebrows. Yan Xiaohan said seriously, "The Lord Marquis has caught a cold, and his injuries to his legs have yet to heal fully. The Marquis's manor is short on medicines, which is likely to slow his recovery. It would be better for the Lord Marquis to quietly remain here, and then, when he is recuperated, make further plans." "What plans?" Fu Shen asked, smiling, though there wasn't a trace of a smile in his eyes. "Plans to marry you?" "What else?" Yan Xiaohan said. "Do you think you have a better choice, Lord Marquis?" The smile on Fu Shen's face vanished altogether. "Are you planning to keep me under house arrest?" Yan Xiaohan shook his head and said, "A word in private?" He took Fu Shen aside, leaned down, and whispered something into his ear. After hearing him out, Fu Shen didn't speak for a long time, staring at him fixedly. After the silence, he suddenly turned his head to say to Zhao Zun, "Did you see all that?" Zhao Zun, looking perplexed, nodded. "Then that's how it is," said Fu Shen. What? Zhao Zun was bewildered. "General," Fu Shen rather impatiently said, "you saw it as well as I did. His Honor, the Imperial Investigator, coveting my beauty, has abducted me by force and is keeping me locked up in his manor, not permitting me to leave. So for now, if anyone else wants to see me, say that I'm staying at Yan Manor to convalesce. There we go." Zhao Zun said nothing. He looked at Yan Xiaohan apprehensively. Lord Yan had been struck so hard by the unjust accusation falling out of the sky that he was seeing stars. He could hardly keep his footing. All the same, he still forced out a smile with gritted teeth and said, "Let's do as the Lord Marquis says." Zhao Zun suddenly gained some insight into why Yan Xiaohan's reputation in court was so bad. It was said that every time he argued with Fu Shen, whether he won or lost, the word in the capital the next day would always be, "The court's dog has been abusing a loyal and upright man again." One moment. Okay. Chapter 13. After seeing off Zhao Zun, the two of them returned to the bedroom, and Fu Shen at last said, "What did you actually mean by that? Explain yourself." "You don't understand me, but still dared to make Zhao Zun leave?" Yan Xiaohan's eyes curved. "Aren't you scared I really will keep you under house arrest?" Fu Shen really wanted to kick him. "Don't talk nonsense." Yan Xiaohan said, "If you stay with me for now, I'll help you fight for a chance to return to Yanshao." I was very clear. "That's not what I was talking about, Yan Xiaohan," Fu Shen said distinctly. "I'm asking you, whose side are you really on?" "You are His Majesty's most interested official, the most favored confidant of the Emperor, only a step aside from ascending to heaven. Why would you help a person naturally hostile to you?" Yan Xiaohan's eyes were still curved, but the gentle mockery that had just been in them had vanished. He seemed to have instantly put on a suit of impervious armor. He carelessly said, "Since there are subjects with undivided loyalty in the world, of course there are also those with divided loyalties." Fu Shen said, "There is no need to humble yourself unduly." "My lord Marquis, don't be naive," Yan Xiaohan said, smiling. "You've known all along what kind of person I was. Why waste your efforts trying to exculpate me? Though we both belong to the court, you have your own lofty aims, while I am merely making a living as an official. Not for repute, not for power, not for the people, only for myself." That's a mood. I mean, I get it, especially in this day and age, but oof. "The pursuit of benefit, picking a tree on which to perch, that is what the path of an official ought to be. Therefore," he said, "I'm not on your side. I'm only on the side most advantageous to me. Nothing more than that." He was a piece in this game, and he was also the third player. He could be used by one side, charge the enemy lines, and he could also flip over the whole game board at a single disagreement. Since Emperor Yuntai didn't like the weapons in his hands to have too many thoughts, then let him be left high and dry, unarmed and defenseless, because the game piece was unhappy. Fine, I see how it's nothing more than that. What an imposition on you to openly acknowledge your own worthlessness. Then what were you doing bringing me back here? Why didn't you just let me die in the rain at the palace gates?" Yan Xiaohan was impervious, standing his ground. "Naturally, it was because I coveted your beauty, Lord Marquis." Fu Shen was silent. A quick-to-strike regional military commander like him, what he hated most was the rambling and serpentine bureaucratic style of the capital. Yan Xiaohan knew his temper. He laughed lightly, and before Fu Shen could explode, placated. "Fu Shen, stop trying to cover up for me." When he stopped calling him Lord Marquis and switched to using his name, the layer of armor over his whole body seemed to fall, revealing a distant yet familiar silhouette. That was the Yan Xiaohan Fu Shen had first met. Choosing a side between you and His Majesty is one thing, and casually helping you out is another thing. You and I have known each other for many years. I couldn't just stand there and watch you fall. Just as he himself had said, benefit came before everything. The steel yard in Yan Xiaohan's heart weighed the morality between friends and the morality of court in a way that was too clear-cut. At last, Fu Shen was also rendered speechless for once. He had never liked verbal sparring, and he especially disliked flapping his lips to convince other people to approve of his ideas. Today's repeated interrogations were already unusual. His patience had run out, and he was even more displeased with Yan Xiaohan's putting himself down as a hopeless case. Grim-faced, he said, "Are you done?" Hearing this, Yan Xiaohan knew at once that he was about to flare up. Fu Shen had first been a young master and later had become a general. He was used to having the final word. Sometimes, when he had a fit of temper, he really was very unreasonable. All the same, Yan Xiaohan held up under the dark clouds over his head and insisted on saying, "I'll send someone to bring your medicine in a while. You've just gotten better. Don't overtax yourself." Fu Shen coldly said, "Get out." Not for nothing was Lord Yan a prodigy among talents. He swiftly shut his mouth obediently and accordingly got out. Fu Shen was so angry at him that he couldn't sleep that night. His leg injuries ached faintly. He tossed and turned on the bed, Yan Xiaohan's words echoing repeatedly in his mind. Actually, he wanted to ask, if it were someone else, out of morality between friends, apart from helping him out, would you also have taken him home and cared for him meticulously, kept vigil through the night fully clothed, exhorted him to take his medicine with utmost patience? Would you also have been offended on his behalf, grit your teeth, and whispered, "Why don't you rebel?" into his ear? After an unknown length of time, the sound of the wind gradually rose outside the window. The rain beat against the lattice, the plashing urging on the deep-rooted ache and negligible drowsiness. Fu Shen had his eyes closed, resting, when the tips of his ears suddenly moved acutely as he heard footsteps outside, kept very quiet. It was Yan Xiaohan. He evened out and lengthened his breaths, perfectly feigning sleep. He shut his eyes fully, relying only on hearing to distinguish the other's movements. At the same time, many thoughts passed through his mind, but all of them only skimmed the surface. He couldn't catch a single one. Fu Shen didn't want to acknowledge that he was actually nervous. Yan Xiaohan quietly approached the bed. Fu Shen felt a heaviness on his legs, followed by a corner of the quilt being raised and something warm landing in the bedding. After doing all this, Yan Xiaohan didn't stay long. He only left as silently as he had come. When the door closed noiselessly, Fu Shen opened his eyes. By the faint light shining in through the window, he saw that another quilt had been added over his legs. His calf touched a solid heat source. He stuck a hand into the quilt and felt around. It was a hot water bottle made of silver. That is really cool, but you'd have to be so careful not to burn yourself. Just think how hot those copper tin mugs get over campfires. That's a nice thought, but no direct skin contact with that. Outside the window, the rain pattered. His injured legs had poor circulation. Even covered by a quilt, they wouldn't warm up. He hadn't cared much about the pain before, but once he felt the warmth of the little hot water bottle, the cold from before suddenly became unbearable. Would you also go so far for another person? Fu Shen lay back face up on the bed and stared blankly at the bed's canopy. He thought that perhaps he really was unsuited to court. The Beiyuan commander could wield his sword and wipe out enemy invaders, but his mind could effortlessly be tied up by a quilt and a hot water bottle. If he couldn't fight free of the lap of luxury, how would he face the bloodless soft knives in the future? What a fucking mess, he thought. Perhaps because he had thought so much before going to sleep, now of Yan Xiaohan and now of Emperor Yun Tai, Fu Shen, who rarely dreamed, actually dreamed of when he had been a teenager. When he was 16, he had met Yan Xiaohan for the first time. On a cold food festival in the 18th year of Yuntai, the setting sun was grand and glorious in the imperial city. Flowers flew everywhere in the springtime city, the palace garden willows, put out for the occasion, rustling in the east wind. That day, Emperor Yuntai had gone out to offer sacrifices at his ancestral tombs. The imperial guard had come along. By coincidence, Fu Shen and a group of young lordlings of his acquaintance had been out for a spring outing. At dusk, they were just returning to the city. It was early spring, and the city was filled with young men and women. A group of handsome and elegant young masters riding into the city attracted countless gazes. There were also bold women who tossed toward the crowd their silk handkerchiefs or the various flowers they had been using to play the fight of 100 plants. Their impetus not to be outdone by the old women tossing fruit at Pang An's carriage. It was an event of unprecedented magnificence. The people stopped in their tracks. There was an unusual bustle outside of the city gates. Hang on. Just then, the clapping of horse hooves suddenly came from behind. Fully armed and armored imperial guards rushed into the city. The crowd made way automatically. The lead rider called loudly, "The Emperor's carriage passes! Idlers, keep back!" The crowd converged in front of Fu Shen. The ones at the front retreating again and again, and those at the back, for some reason, got caught up in a traffic jam. Seeing the imperial guards about to charge up in front of them, Fu Shen hastily turned his horse's head to make way. But when he turned, he just happened to dodge a flower that had been thrown at the back of his head. That flower seemed to have grown eyes. It avoided Fu Shen and flew straight towards the lead imperial guard. The person who had thrown the flower must have used great strength. Fu Shen even thought he could hear the sound of it whistling as it flew. "It's all over," he thought hopelessly. Throwing flowers at a young master was called being romantic, but throwing flowers at an imperial guard was called an elderly person celebrating a birthday by hanging themselves, thinking they had lived long enough. It was a stupidly suicidal act. The imperial guard raised a hand to stop the flower flying towards him and looked Fu Shen's way in astonishment. Fu Shen reacted extremely fast. He immediately pulled up his sleeve to cover his face. The imperial guard was speechless. Before there was time to say anything, the emperor's carriage had already entered the city gates, with the imperial guards leading the way and the people worshipfully kneeling. Fu Shen and his party were the children of nobles, and two among them had been granted hereditary military posts. By coincidence, they were kneeling at the very front. Emperor Yuntai also noticed these young lordlings who were like cranes amidst a flock of chickens, and he deliberately stopped to question them. Among military officials, the Duke of Ying Manor had the healthiest reputation, so Fu Shen was unavoidably singled out to receive some words of encouragement from the emperor. When his legs were hurting from kneeling on the stone tile, His Majesty finally had pity and set out back to the palace. The emperor's carriage continued forward. Following this, the imperial guards filed past. Fu Shen was kneeling properly, waiting for His Majesty to get further away, when a horse's hooves suddenly halted in front of him for an instant. Oh boy. I think I know who this is. He raised his head in bewilderment and met a pair of deep, smiling eyes. The setting sun was golden, the dusk and clouds harmoniously combined. The man before him, the depth of the spring breeze. Fu Shen's gaze slid from his eyes to his hands holding the reins, and noticed that he held a white flower in his palm. This was the Imperial Guard from before. There was no time to pull up his sleeve now, even if he had wanted to. All he could do was kneel there, watching the man turn up the corners of his light-colored lips, wave a hand to toss the flower back to him, and then urge his horse on and swagger off. And he had tossed it just right. The flower drifted down, caught perfectly on Fu Shen's collar. It was simply as if he had deliberately put it there for him. The still immature Fu Shen was like a scholar whose soul had been captured by a tempting fox spirit. His head full of paste, he stood up, his eyes vacant, his mind not his own. That smile seemed to have melted into the evening glow. It was still reflected in his eyes. "Hey, Fu Xiang, what are you looking at? Are we going?" By odd coincidence, he didn't throw that flower away. Instead, he held it in his hand, got onto his horse, and was a pretense of carelessness, asked the person next to him. "That Imperial Guard just now, do you know him, Yi Xiang?" Riding abreast of him was Yi Siming, the heir of the Duke of Chen, who had already been awarded the upper fourth rank post of captain in the Jinwu Guard. Hearing this question, he pursed his lips, contempt appearing in his eyes. "You mean the one who just passed by spurring his horse? Worthy little brother, don't say Gaga didn't warn you. That brat is no good. He isn't worth the likes of us going to the trouble of making friends." Fu Shen said, "What do you mean?" Yi Siming said, "That man is a captain in the left Longwu Corps, Yan Shaohang." As soon as he heard this, Fu Shen understood. The Jinwu Guard was the head of the South Yemen Imperial Guard, while the Longwu Guard belonged to the North Yemen. The two had never gotten along. No wonder Yi Siming had nothing good to say about him. Yi Siming continued, "You might not know, he's the adopted son of Duan Linglong. Don't pay attention to his good looks. What use are they? Who knows how he climbed up to his position?" In great show, the nobles looked down on scholars. The scholars looked down on ordinary civil officials. The civil officials looked down on military officials. And what all of them looked down on were palace eunuchs. Duan Linglong was foremost among the palace eunuchs at the time. One could well imagine how Yan Shaohan, who acknowledged a court eunuch as his adopted father, would be even lower than a court eunuch in their eyes. Somehow, when Fu Shen heard Yi Siming's words, he didn't feel disgusted. Rather, he felt some inexplicable regret, just as if he had seen a flower growing beside a mire, which had snapped at the stalk as soon as it reached its full bloom. Right, the flower. He brought the flower in his hand up in front of his eyes to scrutinize it, but as soon as he glanced at it, his expression instantly froze on his face. For fuck's sake, this was a twin lotus! So they have a little aside. The two twin lotus flowers growing on one stalk, a common symbol for a loving couple. That's pretty fun. Okay, so it looks like we have 2 chapters left, which is, I think, probably about the right length. I can feel it starting to activate in my veins. I awaken. All right, chapter 14. When Fu Shen woke the next day, Yan Xiaohan had long since left. That the two of them had parted on bad terms the night before had been noticed to some extent by the servants. Today, they were unusually quiet, lest they accidentally get in trouble with him. Fu Shen had relived the sweet experience of the past, remembered many former events. He didn't feel that last night's argument represented a serious divergence. Everyone had their ambitions, and he couldn't ask of everyone that they walk the upright path like him. Moreover, he had a clear idea of Yan Xiaohan's conduct. While it didn't amount to kind and honest, neither was it as heartless and faithless as he himself said. On this day, an endless stream of visitors came to the Marquis of Jingning Manor, following Fu Shen's prolonged kneeling at the palace gate. 6 imperial censors joining forces to present a memorial of admonition to the throne, and the Duke of Ying asking for leave on account of illness and shutting up his manor. Countless people in the capital were waiting to see how this drama would wind up. Of course, Zhao Zun couldn't very well directly convey the lie Fu Shen had made up. All he could do was hem and haw, saying that the Lord Marquis is convalescing at Lord Yan's manor. But these words truly gave the imagination room to roam. Hearing that the Ministry of Rites was just setting up preparing a wedding for the two of them, people knew that the union between Yan Xiaohan and Fu Shen was already set in stone. By contrast, Yan Manor was much more tranquil. For one thing, it was because Yan Xiaohan was still at court. The majority of probing attempts were all deflected by him outside. For another, the Feilong Guard's infamy was too robust. The people willing to have dealings and be friends with him were truly few. Fu Shen's nature was to make himself at home wherever he happened to be. He comfortably passed the days in Yan Manor at his leisure, thinking that this place was 100 times better than his weed-choked Marquis' manor. There were pretty maids to delight the eyes, and 3 varied meals a day, as well as all kinds of snacks. Apart from having to hold his nose and drink the bitter medicine Shen Yisei prescribed, everything could be rated as perfection. I mean, at least he's not having a bad time about it. He's just like, well, I'm stuck here. And this is kind of nice. One evening, after getting off duty, Yan Xiaohan walked into the courtyard and heard Fu Shen saying feelingly inside, "Calligraphy by He Tiao, which gets quotes on the market, but never changes hands now. How many people want to get their hands on one but can't? And he just hangs it up right out in the open. Does your master understand it?" Since Fu Shen's illness had gradually improved, Yan's manor's atmosphere had been a little insufficiently sedate. The maid's laughter, tinkling as silver bells, floated out of the half-shut window. Yan Xiaohan stopped in his tracks. He cocked an ear to listen carefully, a feeling that was at once steady and dissatisfied suddenly appearing in his heart. "I think you jelly," he thought, somewhat making trouble on purpose. "I'm the one who brings you medicine and gives you water, and I'm the one who ought to join you in appreciating artwork and drinking tea too. Why will you talk and laugh with the maids, but begrudge me even a smile?" He wanted to take another step forward, but his feet seemed to have been nailed to the ground. The dizziness of the emotions going to his head abruptly cooled, and Yan Xiaohan mulled over the line of thought that had just gone through his mind. It was as if he had bit into a mouthful of nothing but shards of ice. He smiled bitterly, searching his conscience, and asked himself, Why would it be me? No matter what, he couldn't take this step. Yan Xiaohan felt like a snail whose shell had been broken. After the pitcher had shattered that night, he could no longer support a suit of composed, self-possessed armor with which to face Fu Shen. As he thought this, his footsteps changed direction to match his thoughts. He turned and went out of the courtyard. He hadn't expected there to be an especially sharp-eared maid inside. Hearing footsteps, she glanced out just in time to catch him in the act. "Master is back!" Everyone hurried to open the door and welcome him inside. Fu Shen turned his head from in front of the bookshelf. He held a cup of goji and jujube tea in his hands, and there was a lingering smile in the depths of his eyes, as if he had deliberately kept it for him. He said in greeting, "You're back." Not receiving the cold reception he had imagined, Yan Xiaohan startled. Fu Shen saw that his expression was off and said in concern, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" He said to the maids, "Go on, withdraw. Have the kitchen prepared dinner. I'll have a talk with your master." His manner and tone really were just like that of this manner's other master. Before, Yan Xiaohan had never imagined that in the future he would marry such a wife. Perhaps he would even have lived out his whole life in solitude. But the scene in front of him was as natural and easy as if made in accordance with his desires, unexpectedly filling in the missing piece in his dreams. I love that both of them think the other one is the wife. Like, that is going to be a conversation that is going to pop up, be like, "You're such a nice wife," and someone's going to be like, "Wife?" Like, that is, I cannot wait for that part, because they're both sassy men. Oh, he didn't want to consider this any deeper. He got his emotions in order, sat down across from Fu Shen, and started in on serious business. The Ministry of Rites has determined the 12th day of the second month as the wedding date, during the flower festival. As I see it, when the imperial edict arranging the marriage has just been issued going to His Majesty to say you want to return to Beijing now, will certainly earn you a refusal. It's better to wait until the end of the year, then submit a memorial to the throne clearly stating that on the verge of marriage you earnestly request to return to Yangshao to pay tribute to your father and uncle, and notify all of your fellow soldiers. Set out during the first month, return to the capital during the second month. I'm afraid His Majesty will only approve it that way." Fu Shen pondered briefly, then nodded and said, "That makes sense. Then let's do that." He abruptly realized that since he had been living with Yan Xiaohan, the frequency with which he said, "Let's do that," had increased sharply. This feeling was very peculiar. Fu Shen felt none of the dissatisfaction of being deprived of the power of decision-making. Rather, he felt that he was being spared worry, because if it had been him, he most likely would have made the same decisions. Even more unusual, or even more unheard of, these decisions that Fu Shen could find no fault with would be certain to give him many advantages and no disadvantages. As an outsider, Yan Xiaohan could put himself in his shoes and consider the situation on his account. Once or twice was happenstance, but when it happened over and over, what it hid was profound thoughtfulness and care. It really feels good not to have to take the trouble myself, Fu Shen slowly sighed to himself. I'm afraid anyone who gets sincere treatment from him will be spoiled rotten. Having finished discussing serious business, the two of them had nothing to say to each other. They sank into an awkward silence. A long moment later, Fu Shen voluntarily picked a topic. You looked unhappy just now. What happened? Yan Xiaohan was sitting in a round-backed armchair, his spine still perfectly upright. Shaking his head, he said, "Nothing." The odd thing would have been if Fu Shen had believed him. But however clever he was, he still couldn't guess Lord Yan's thoughts, which were like a needle at the bottom of the sea. Tentatively, he said, "Did you sleep badly? Or are you still angry about the other day?" Yan Xiaohan's eyebrows moved. He looked a little astonished, but he said nothing. Fu Shen had more or less seen through him. Well, he said it was nothing. Written all over his face were the words, "Something's wrong. I won't say what. Come cheer me up." He thought, "I'm spoiling you." But outwardly, he continued to ask, "Are you really angry? Because I told you to get out?" As if this were beneath him, Yan Xiaohan humphed through his nose. Fu Shen, holding back a smile, his expression reading, "Since you're asking, I'll tackle the job of cheering you up," said, "I was wrong. I shouldn't have told you to get out. A great man can afford to be broad-minded. Don't squabble with the likes of me." Yan Xiaohan looked at him fixedly, staring so hard that Fu Shen was about to break out in goose flesh. He braced himself and met his eyes. Shortly, Yan Xiaohan abruptly turned his face away and burst out laughing with a snort. Fu Shen inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. He reached up to touch the roots of his ears. They were heated up a little bit. Bewildered, he thought, "What's wrong with me? Why not just let him die mad?" Yan Xiaohan took a long time to stop laughing. Nothing was left of Fu Shen's feigned affection. He glanced at him and coolly said, "All better now? No more tantrums?" Yan Xiaohan cupped his hands and frankly said, "All better. Thank you for your consideration, Lord Marquis." Fu Shen laughed in ridicule and didn't squabble with him. He turned his wheelchair and headed out the door. "How old are you? It's shameful." That night, once again on good terms, the two of them again occupied the bedroom together. There was no serious business, it was just that Yan Xiaohan was used to coming to look in on him before going to sleep. These last few days, when Fu Shen had dressed or bathed, sat or lain down, or gotten up, Yan Xiaohan had been there himself without exception. Only when it came to taking medicine, due to him not being at the manor during the day, had he not watched in person apart from the very few first days. Before bedtime, when a maid came in to bring medicine, Yan Xiaohan just happened to have been sent to the study by Fu Shen to get him a book. When he returned, Fu Shen was leaning against the headboard of the bed, the bowl of medicine on the table already empty. Yan Xiaohan had a feeling something was off. He gave Fu Shen the book and looked suspiciously at the bowl of medicine. Fu Shen noticed his gaze and casually asked, "What are you looking at?" Yan Xiaohan turned his face towards him. His gaze was like a dragonfly touching the water, flitting over Fu Shen's face. "That's not right." Fu Shen said, Yan Xiaohan said, "Did you drink the medicine?" Fu Shen said, "Yes." He pointed to the bowl. "The bowl is right there." "You're full of it." Yan Xiaohan had already caught him in a lie, but he was still quibbling. As soon as he thought of Fu Shen not taking his own health seriously, Yan Xiaohan flew into a rage. "Should I bring you a mirror so you can take a look at your face? You drank the medicine? Your lips are dry. What did you drink it with? Your ears? Did it cure your brain?" Fu Shen fell silent. It was all over. His deceit hadn't worked out. He'd been caught red-handed. Looking at his speechless appearance, Yan Xiaohan knew that this couldn't be the first time Fu Shen had done such a thing. Furious, he paced around the room, then finally kicked over a white porcelain spittoon from beside the bed. He looked down, and there it was. He had the evidence. Fu Shen sat earnestly in bed, his manner in admitting his crime and waiting to be put to death very insincere. Yan Xiaohan pointed at him, took a deep breath, barely managed to suppress his spleen, and went out to order a servant to prepare another bowl of medicine. He returned to the room, closed the door, and said with a grim look, "Go on. How long has this been going on?" Fu Shen gave a few dry laughs. "Don't get angry. My cold is better. It doesn't matter very much whether I take the medicine or not." "Doesn't matter?" Yan Xiaohan asked coldly. "Who told you there was no need to take the medicine? Shan Yisei or me?" Fu Shen said nothing. There was evidence that, entirely out of respect for Yan Xiaohan's concern for his health, he was already trying very hard to restrain himself and not quarrel. But that scoundrel devoid to pointing out other shortcomings still wouldn't stop. Kept prattling on and on, ruining your health while you're young and can take it. Haven't you thought about what you'll do when you get old? Don't you know how many injuries you have? If your cold isn't treated properly, when it leaves you prone to illness, it'll be too late for you to understand. Fu Shen was getting a headache from his yammering. There was a headstrong, domineering aspect to his personality. No one had dared to scold him for many years. Been the one in the wrong to start with, but Yan Xiaohan saying this provoked him into mutiny. Fu Shen impatiently waved a hand. "Fine. Aren't you done yet? There's no need to lose your temper. I'm not going to leave you a widow before the wedding." Yan Xiaohan struck fast as lightning, grabbing his chin. In a low shout he said, "Don't talk nonsense." He was truly furious. The strength he used great. Fu Shen felt that his chin was about to be crushed. But precisely because of this, he at last clearly saw the flash of shock and pain in the depths of Yan Xiaohan's eyes. His heart instantly softened. Fu Shen was immune to force but susceptible to softness. When a normally tough person revealed an occasional sliver of weakness, his heart's defenses were especially easy to puncture. In addition to which, he had been the one in the wrong. He froze briefly, then covered Yan Xiaohan's right hand, which was holding his chin, and lightly patted it a few times as if consoling him. "Fine, fine. I'm sorry. It was my fault, all right." As if Yan Xiaohan had realized that he had been given way to on impulse. He had given way to impulse. He immediately let him go. But Fu Shen held on, loosely keeping his hand in his own. Out of nowhere came a sense of tender intimacy. When he lowered his eyes to look, the better part of his anger in his heart was extinguished. Yan Xiaohan gave a long sigh. "You're infuriating." Fu Shen rushed to acknowledge his error and apologize, guaranteeing over and over that he had just had a momentary slip of the tongue. In the future, he wouldn't blurt out things. Finally, he couldn't resist laughing. Shaking his head, he said, "What's the matter with you lately? Everything makes you angry." Yan Xiaohan found that while he seemed unapproachable and difficult to move, as long as you were sincerely good to him, Fu Shen could be unusually tolerant and forbearing. He was aware that he had found the trick to smoothing his ruffled feathers. While he still wore a long face, there was a small curve at the corner of his eyes. He pronounced a chilly judgment. Fiend in human form. Considered carefully, the situation had been worsening dramatically ever since he had set out back to the capital. The ambush and assassination attempt, the plots and intrigue, the emperor arranging their marriage, each of them was enough to make a person worry, toss and turn sleeplessly. Why was it instead these petty trifles, making two grown men act like children playing house, fighting and making up? Were they bored? A person as firm and unyielding as Fu Shen, or as crafty and calculating as Yan Xiaohan, who, in the outside world, stirred up great events and commanded the situation, when they came back under the same roof, turned out to be flesh and blood too, with emotions that showed on their faces. Probably it was only because this was home. That's so cute. All right, here's our last chapter, and it looks like it's a big one. Chapter 15. Not long after, a maid brought in the new medicine. Yan Xiaohan took it with his own hands and brought it in front of Fu Shen. He had only one word for him: drink. Fu Shen stared at the steaming medicine with hopeless apathy, taking silent breaths. Seeing him like this, Yan Xiaohan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He couldn't resist ridiculing him. Lord Marquis, if your legs weren't crippled, you'd be up on the roof by now, wouldn't you? Leave, Fu Shen glared at Yan Xiaohan. Have a heart, stop yammering. Were you born in the year of the old mother hen? Put the medicine there, I can drink it myself. Yan Xiaohan really hadn't expected that drinking this medicine would pose such a difficulty for him. After all, in his eyes, Fu Shen had always been a rather self-disciplined person, never recoiling from anything he ought to do, virtually never willful. He softened his voice and coaxed. There isn't much medicine in this bowl. Close your eyes and nerve yourself up. It'll be gone in a few mouthfuls, really. Fu Shen turned his head away in pain. Is the medicine too bitter for you? Is it that bad? Yan Xiaohan raised the bowl and tried it himself. He frowned. He thought that it was a little bitter, but not so bad as to be unbearable. Why would Fu Shen resist like this? This isn't right. Seeing Fu Shen's lips and face both turning white, his forehead furrowed, forcing himself to bear up, Yan Xiaohan supposed that the smell of the medicine had turned his stomach. So he put the medicine bowl aside, took his hands, and put the fingers together to gently rub the Naiguan acupoints on his wrists. He tentatively said, "Even an ordinary person wouldn't have such a major reaction, never mind you. Is there some uncomfortable secret? Could you tell me about it?" Fu Shen's hands in his grip were limp, like the outspread paws of a small animal. He didn't evade, only seemed a little dejected, not very willing to bring up the past. It's nothing really. You see, when I was young, my health was poor. I often drank medicine. My mother died early, and the nursemaid didn't especially care about me. Seeing me unwilling to drink medicine, she would just pinch my nose and force it down. Whenever she did that, I would throw it up. Later, it gradually turned into a bad habit. I'd throw up when I ate anything. Yan Xiaohan's eyes cooled as he listened. He softly asked, "Didn't your family find out?" Fu Shen's lip curled. My father was at the border then, often unable to come home. Who would there have been to pay attention to me? Later, it was my second uncle who noticed something was wrong. He got people to keep an eye on that nursemaid in secret, and finally saved me from her clutches. He sighed and candidly said, "Actually, it's not like I can't drink it. It's just that I get irritated and don't want to drink it." A warm sensation came from his wrists. Yet Xiao Han practiced martial arts. His fingers wouldn't be soft at all. But the strength he applied to kneading was perfectly gauged, giving imperceptible comfort. Fu Shen used this bit of warmth to prepare himself. He said to himself that he couldn't avoid it. Therefore, he leaned over and reached out to take the medicine bowl. Contrary to his expectations, Yan Xiaohan uncharacteristically held him back. Fu Shen looked up at him dubiously. Yan Xiaohan had been sitting on the round stool across from the bed, but now he put the medicine at the bedside, stood up, and sat on the edge of the bed, leaning against the railing. He said, "This one today is the last bowl. Tomorrow I'll have Shen Yisei prescribe you pills instead." Fu Shen thought, "Pills it is then. But why are you sitting so close?" Yan Xiaohan laughed. There was some indefinable embarrassment in his tone. "You probably don't remember. Actually, when you were unconscious before, you could drink medicine." Fu Shen said, "I fed it to you myself," said Yan Xiaohan. Fu Shen was dumbfounded. Had he really been unconscious? Why did he feel like he had amnesia? "What are you up to?" Fu Shen said wearily. "Going to use force? You're ready to give this room up as a loss?" Fu Shen couldn't resist a smile. "Relax. I'm not planning on forcing you. Come here." Half trusting and half suspicious, Fu Shen shifted slightly towards him. Yan Xiaohan said, "Turn around, with your back to me." Fu Shen did as he said. He had been sitting up perfectly straight in bed before. Yan Xiaohan pulled his shoulders, pressing back firmly. Fu Shen fell face up in his arms. He had been ready for bed, having already removed his outer robe. He wore only a thin inner robe of white silk, and his hair was loose. He was completely defenseless. Through a single layer of cloth, Fu Shen immediately felt the firm, warm body press close to his back, with another person's breathing distinctly audible. The smell of the medicine was bitter, but it couldn't hide the agarwood scent curling outward from Yan Xiaohan's collar. Fu Shen began to struggle as if his tail had been stepped on. Sternly, he said, "Yan Xiaohan, are you tired of living?" "Settle down, don't flail." Yan Xiaohan leaned back against the headboard, holding him up in a half-reclining posture with his left shoulder and chest, bowl in his left hand and spoon in his right, simply and effectively holding Fu Shen firmly in his arms. When he lowered his head, his chin touched the hair at Fu Shen's temple. "Do you understand now? At the beginning, this was how I fed you. I wasn't taking advantage of you. It's hard to say who was getting the upper hand." Fu Shen remembered all of it. While he had been in a daze, running a high fever that wouldn't come down, there had in fact been a person who had held him again and again, personally blew on the medicine to cool it, and fed it to him one mouthful at a time. He had struggled, but that person had been extraordinarily gentle and patient, nothing like the rough and heavy-handed nursemaid in his memories. There had been a person who had gently coaxed him, even brought the porcelain spoon up to his lips lightly, and when he finished feeding him the medicine, would feed him another spoonful of lightly flavored honey water. 3 bowls of medicine a day hadn't seemed so hard to swallow then. With the skill that comes from practice, Yan Xiaohan adjusted his posture to a suitable one. Let's try and see whether it'll work again. Just this once, it won't happen again. Come, open your mouth. For the first time in his life, Fu Shen wanted to find a place to hide, but he was trapped within the small space of a pair of arms. A spoonful of medicine was soon brought up to his mouth. The movement was gentle and slow, but uncompromisingly waiting for him to part his lips. Suddenly, as if another consciousness had taken over, without regard for his intellectual wariness, his body reacted according to those old memories. When the first mouthful of medicine slid down his throat, he heard Yan Xiaohan laugh softly over his head, as if he were disgruntled but couldn't help being indulgent. After all that back and forth, you just needed someone to wait upon you, eldest young master. Fu Shen poked him with his elbow, seeming dissatisfied, but perhaps because he used too little force. It was more like the false protest of someone who was actually agreeing. This poke of the elbow was full of suggestiveness. So what if he was an eldest young master? The eldest young master had fallen into his hands. With his cooperation, the bowl of medicine was soon empty. Fu Shen, like a consummate lord, quietly asked for water without so much as raising his eyelids. Yan Xiaohan held him with his left hand and brought a teacup up to his mouth. Fu Shen drank a mouthful from his hand, then pursed his lips and said, "It's not sweet." "Aren't you finicky?" Yan Xiaohan put the teacup back where it had come from and grumbled half in earnest. "You just drank medicine. Anything you drink now will be sweet." Fu Shen seemed to laugh, but because he was pressed into his arms, it sounded like a groan. Yan Xiaohan was about to put Fu Shen back on the bed, but unexpectedly, the person he was holding all of a sudden quietly turned, reached out his arms, and put them around his waist, resting his head against the hollow of his shoulder, and in this posture, curled up in his arms, closed his eyes, and went to sleep. Yan Xiaohan instantly stilled. The candle flickered, casting light on the beautiful pair. There was no need to speak. Both of them were well aware of what this moment meant. His heart had been touched. Hang on. It's not done. I just need a sip. All right. 1 month later, the carriage stopped outside Yan Manor's side gate. Fu Shen did not wish to attract notice on this trip, so he didn't even leave by the main gate. He was traveling light, with only a few dozen bodyguards accompanying him. Zhao Zun carried Fu Shen into the carriage on his back, put away the wheelchair, and asked with a pretense of casualness. "General, isn't Lord Yan coming to see you off?" Fu Shen's gaze flickered at having the weight on his mind touched. Then he simply closed his eyes and carelessly said, "There's no need for him to see me off. Is everything put away? Let's set out." Zhao Zun was extremely perceptive. He kept thinking that Fu Shen's manner was off. Couldn't say it was bad, just a little strange. It was as if he had suddenly become distanced from that Lord Yan, yet there was no estrangement to be seen between them. but he only dared to think these words inwardly. He didn't dare to ask Fu Shen what was actually going on. Zhao Zun leapt onto his horse and took the lead in setting off. The carriage slowly began to move after him. Yan Manor's servants watched them go until they were too far to be seen, then finally returned inside and pulled the side gate shut. When the party had left the city gates, before they could go far, they suddenly heard urgent hoofbeats behind them. A man and a horse came towards them like the wind. Zhao Zun pulled up his horse and stopped. He recognized the official robe of the Feilong Guard from a distance and immediately felt an intense headache. He muttered to himself, "What are you two up to? Didn't you say that he wasn't seeing you off?" Fu Shen was resting with his eyes closed inside the carriage. He had nearly fallen asleep. When he felt the carriage slowly stop, he didn't open his eyes, only languidly asked, "Chongshan?" Next, the carriage's curtain was pulled open, and a figure accompanied by a thread of daylight leapt into the carriage. When Fu Shen opened his eyes, he was slightly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you off before you left, after all," Yan Xiaohan said warmly. "I wouldn't feel at ease otherwise." The two of them had, in fact, been somewhat awkward lately. To be precise, it had started that night. Their frames of mind had both undergone a change, and they both needed time to think things through. This kind of drifting apart made a person toss and turn, but it wasn't a torment, because they both knew what conclusion was waiting up ahead. It was just that the reality wasn't living up to the name. The worst outcome couldn't be worse than the present. When a person was already standing at the bottom of a valley, any direction he went in would be for the better. Going deeper, to expand on the daydream, perhaps they would have to thank Emperor Yun Tai for his exceptional insight, which had bestowed on them the perfect match. When Fu Shen saw him, he relaxed inwardly, but he kept up the act outwardly. Because there were ears everywhere, while they were inside a carriage, they still couldn't go too far overboard in their words and gestures. He calmly said, "In the past, I traveled between the northern frontier and the capital 80 times, if not 100. What is there that your honor can't feel easy about? Go. You have a post to fill. Don't delay too long." Yan Xiaohan said, "After we part today, the next time we will see each other, it will be next year. I hope the Lord Marquis will strictly adhere to the marriage contract and honor his promise." Zhao Zun, who had his ears pricked up listening in from outside the carriage, felt a chill come over his back. He thought, "Is this Lord Yan a dolt? He knows perfectly well the Lord Marquis is unhappy about the arranged marriage. Why can't he leave well enough alone?" Inside the carriage, Yan Xiaohan suddenly pulled Fu Shen over and hugged him tightly. He lowered his head and said into his ear, "You must be careful when you go outside. The north is frigid. Look after your own health. Don't make me worry." These two are adorable, that's right. Fu Shen gave a rare soft "Umph," and half jokingly pressed on his back. "Our hearts are as one." The embrace was warm, their temples pressed against each other. Their heartbeats gradually synchronized. Fu Shen gently pressed his cheek against Yan Xiaohan's, extremely affectionate, as if for the first time in his life knowing the meaning of tender feelings like water, the wedding day ahead like a dream. After a long embrace, he finally pushed Yan Xiaohan away, casually straightened out the wrinkles that had been pressed into his collar, and indicated for him to get out of the carriage. At the same time, he sent him away in extremely arrogant and aggressive tones. Lord Yan can rest easy. At next year's flower festival, I will personally come to the door to fetch the bride. Prepare a sizable dowry. Do not let me down. Everyone, Yan Xiaohan included, was at a loss for words. Zhao Zun surreptitiously felt for the sword at his waist, making ready in case a fight started to charge forward at once to mediate in favor of one side. He couldn't let the Lord Marquis get beaten to death for his loose tongue. 2 days later, the carriage drove into Yuanshao. The surrounding scenery became more and more familiar. Apart from the bare trees and the snow lying all over the ground, there was no difference from when he had left in the fall. Fu Shen had been born in the capital, but he had grown up on the northern border. Yanshao was like his second home. The familiar sights made him relax in spite of himself. He even became interested in looking out the carriage's small window to get an occasional look at the people passing by outside. They were traveling on the trade road. The whole way, they passed by towns and villages of all sizes. In the evening, they stopped over in Lianqi Town. There we go. While passing through a small alley, Fu Shen smelled the sweet, cool scent of wine, which piqued his interest. Therefore, he ordered Zhao Zun to turn around and prepare to carry out an investigation. Zhao Zun, with a bitter look, tried desperately to obstruct him. My lord, you cannot drink alcohol. We're about to get back and see Army Dr. Du. Fu Shen was completely indifferent. Relax. Anything I drink tonight will be digested by morning. He won't notice. Zhao Zun said, Lord Yan also doesn't want you to drink. Fu Shen's eager smile froze. He pointed resentfully at Zhao Zun. Which way does your elbow bend, traitor? Bei Yuan is my domain. However long Yan Xiaohan's reach may be, can his control extend here? Huh? All of you keep your mouth shut tight. If half a word of this gets out, you're the one I'll be asking about it. Zhao Zun couldn't resist talking back. The Feilong Guard's information is good. Isn't it more likely than not that he'll find out? The flames of Fu Shen's bluster were instantly cut in half. Changshan, you're still young. You don't understand the dangers of the human heart, Fu Shen said earnestly. Between myself and Yan Xiaohan, there isn't merely a struggle as of which the two of us will come out on top. More than that, there is the contest between the Beiyuan army and the Feilong Guard. If I allow myself to be controlled by him in places outside the capital, I'll be henpecked before my wife has even crossed the threshold. If it gets out, how will the men of the Beiyuan army hold their heads up before the Feilong Guard? Zhao Zun was surprised over and over as he listened, but thinking it over carefully, it did in fact make sense. He said slowly, the Lord Marquis is wise. After the not henpecked Marquis of Jingning, who could hold up heaven and earth, got through duping the silly child, he rolled his wheelchair into the little alley with a clear conscience. The wine shop was deep in the alley and took up little space. It had only 4 sets of tables and chairs and a counter set out. The proprietress was selling the drinks. She was just bustling around with her head down. Fu Shen picked a table with slightly more space and tapped lightly on the tabletop. Raising his voice, he said, "Shopkeeper, what wines do you have?" The woman behind the counter quickly raised her head and looked at him. She was just about to speak, but when she got a clear look on her face, it It was as if she had been struck dead by lightning. She stood stock still in place. Not hearing a response, Fu Shen turned his head to look, and just happened to meet her eyes. Instantly, an unspeakable sense of familiarity surged up in his heart. You are... The two of them spoke simultaneously. Fu Shen stopped, but the woman asked shakily, Sir, is your surname Fu? A tearful smile, happy surprise. This was clearly the appearance of someone at a complete loss for how to react. There was absolutely no malice here. Though Fu Shen's identity had been exposed, he didn't try to conceal himself. He nodded. The next moment, the woman stumbled out from behind the counter and immediately prostrated herself before him. This lowly one was saved by your actions in the past, narrowly escaping death. Heaven has been merciful and given me the fortune to meet my benefactor once again. Superior benefactor, please receive my worship. Wait, Fu Shen had yet to remember who she actually was. Miss, might I ask your name? The woman's tears were already pouring down. Sobbing, she said, Yulan Manor on Mount Beiyang in Huanren Country. The miscarriage of justice in Lord Jin's case. 7 years have passed, and he has yet to be exonerated. Fu Shen's pupils contracted sharply. It was as if he had been attacked heavily head-on. The blood drained from his face. He very rarely forgot himself like this. He asked in disbelief, Are you Kai Yue? The name was like a hurricane, instantly wrecking many years of stubbornness and bias. Memories surged to the sky, immediately drowning Fu Shen. Life and death, sorrow and joy, ups and downs all pushed him into that distant period of the past he had dared not to recall, had been unwilling to mention. This was the first time in his too short youth that his heart had been trampled to pieces. And it was the hard knot between him and Yan Xiaohan that had yet to be untied to this day. And that is the end of chapter 15. And that is where we will be ending it tonight on yet another cliffhanger! Woohoo! I think that's a great place to end it, actually. Because that means we'll be anticipating this coming Tuesday. I think we'll probably end up learning some background history, maybe kind of why they have their arguments, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think this was pretty cool, right? Can't wait for more. I'm the same, Mars Rover. So as I said before, it will be our usual Tuesday at 8 CST for our continuing thing. I'll make the usual posts. I'll have the scheduled stream set up. But then the third... Oh, you might not have been here during that. Next Thursday, I actually will not be streaming. I will be doing Tuesday, and it'll be back to normal the week after. I just will be going to a convention, so I need that time to get ready. But I will come back peppy, happy, and strong as ever. So yeah, I will see you next Tuesday at 8 CST, and we will find out more about the history between our boys. Probably. I don't know. But that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful night or morning, depending on when you're listening, or day. And thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed. This is Rosebud Reads. Out. Good night.